Hey everybody, welcome to the videos from my core plays for the 3-game Sunday slate for this weekend over on Draftkings. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And YouTube tells me around 50% of the people who watch these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor to the channel or if you're just new and you like what you see, consider that subscribe button because it really helps the channel grow. That's obviously going to help me out as well, and it's free, so why the heck not? And if you don't follow me over on social media, hit on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that if you want access to all the extra content that I do provide over on there. But I think that's it for the shameless plug, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. Alright, and leading us off with core play number 1, it's no other than Lamar Jackson here at $7,800. And I feel like he's a very similar play to the Josh Allen play on the Saturday slate, as I thought he was just by far the best play at his position. And I feel like we can say the same exact thing here for Lamar Jackson, as the other quarterbacks on the slate just don't get me too excited. Like we have Tannehill versus the Ravens, Big Ben, Drew Brees, Baker Mayfield, Mitch Trubisky. None of those guys are super exciting options. So the floor ceiling combination with Lamar makes me feel pretty comfortable. And I feel like he's going to be just as high owned as Josh Allen was on the Saturday. So I think he got it close to 90% in cash games. Would not be surprised if we see Lamar at similar numbers here. But it's a great matchup versus the Tennessee Titans. And this is definitely going to be the best game to target from a DFS perspective, as we have a 54.5 point over-under. Meanwhile, the other games are sitting at 47 points apiece. So this game should be back and forth. We have a 3-point spread. The Ravens also own the highest implied team total on the slate at 28.75. And this is a very good matchup versus Tennessee Titans. Their defense has not been good whatsoever this season, whether it's been through the air or on the ground. But they rank 30th DVA versus the pass, and they're allowing the 5th most points per game to the quarterback position, and also close to 300 yards passing per game as well. Now, I know Lamar Jackson typically doesn't do too much damage through the air. He's kind of struggling to get over 200 yards passing in a game this year. On the season, averaging 183 passing yards per game and less than 2 passing touchdowns, and only throwing the ball 25 times per game. But the thing that makes him so valuable is what he can do with his legs, averaging close to 70 rushing yards per game this season, which is almost a built-in 2 passing touchdown floor right there, and a half a rushing touchdown per game with well over 6 yards per carry. So love the matchup here versus the Titans. We know their defense has not been good at all this season. They just got into a shootout with the Houston Texans last week. Deshaun Watson had a really big game, and I would not be surprised if Lamar Jackson puts up a similar game, but more of an emphasis of what he can do on the ground. They've struggled versus the ground as well this season. So loving Lamar here. I know it's pretty obvious, but just an emphasis here that I think he's by far the best quarterback to use on this slate, and this game should be a shootout as well. Alright, getting into core play number 2, we have Michael Thomas here at $6,300, and this is mainly just buying low on a player that I think is just way too cheap. Last season, I know things have changed from last season, but we were paying close to $10,000 for this guy. He's one of the most consistent wide receivers in football. We've had limited games from him this season, but still the numbers have been pretty solid when he's been on the field. Close to a 30% target share, over a 40% market share of the team's air yards, close to an 80% weighted opportunity share, 7.5, 8 targets per game. Again, limited sample size, but he is just way too cheap. He's priced right around DeOntay Johnson, Jarvis Landry, and right below Allen Robinson and A.J. Brown. So I love this price point. The Saints, I know it's a tougher matchup for the Saints here versus the Bears. They're allowing the 8th fewest points per game to the wide receiver position, in addition to being 13th DVA versus the pass, which is top half in the league. But they still have a team total close to 30. They're right below the Baltimore Ravens. They're also playing at home in the Superdome, where they always play their best football. I know they're not going to have the fans in there. That's going to help them, but still way too cheap for Michael Thomas, close to $5,000. So I'm going to be buying low here, despite the tougher matchup. Alright, moving on to our third core play is Deontay Johnson here at $6,200. He's only $100 cheaper than Michael Thomas, as crazy as that sounds. Again, I just think Michael Thomas is way too cheap, but he finds himself in a very good matchup versus the Cleveland Browns secondary. He's going to be missing quite a few pieces, including their star corner, Denzel Ward. It was already a bad secondary with him in there, but you take him out of the equation, and a couple of other guys, it gets even worse. And on the season, they're still 24th versus wide receivers, allowing close to 200 receiving yards per game and over a receiving touchdown, in addition to being 25th DVA versus the pass. Now, they're pretty good versus the run, and this sets up really well for the Steelers' passing attack, because the Steelers don't really run the ball that well. They throw the ball a ton, over 40 times per game this season, and it's really easy to attack this Browns secondary. So I think Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, all these guys can have some pretty big games. And I think they're all viable. If you can't get all the way up to Deontay Johnson, you have to settle for a Juju or a Chase Claypool at cheaper price points. I think that's fine. But the preferred option here is Deontay Johnson, as he is the preferred wide receiver 1 in this offense. He gets the most volume, and volume is always key for fantasy purposes. And on the season, I know he's had some issues with drops in some games and getting injured, but for the most part, he has been pretty good for DFS. About a 23% target share this season, close to 10 targets per game, and about a 25% market share of the team's air yards. And keep in mind, those numbers count games where he got injured and left the game early on. I don't know if you guys remember early on in the season, it seemed like he was doing that for about a month straight, where he'd start the game fine, gets hurt, leaves the game, doesn't come back, and it would just skew his numbers down a little bit. So if you take those games out of the equation, we're looking even closer to around like a 25, closer to a 30% target share. So I like DeOntay Johnson quite a bit here. The volume's going to be there. This is a team that loves to throw the football. They haven't been able to run the ball very well this season. The Browns are much better versus the run than they are versus the pass. So I think all three wide receivers can eat here, but DeOntay Johnson will be my preferred target versus a very bad Browns secondary. All right, moving on to our fourth core play. It's a nice pairing option with Lamar Jackson here. Now, Lamar is one of those quarterbacks you don't have to use a pass catcher with. You can certainly play him naked due to his rushing ability, and he just doesn't do that much damage through the air. But if you are going to roster him with someone, I do like Mark Andrews quite a bit here, and he's by far the best play at his position, so I don't mind forking over a little bit more dough to spend up for him at $5,200. Hollywood Brown is a fine tournament option, but he can be very boom or bust, but it is a really good matchup versus the Tennessee Titans. But I will side with Mark Andrews here just because of position scarcity. But his volume has been pretty fine this season, with a near 30% market share of the team's air yards, which is pretty darn good for a tight end. He does get the ball down the field. About a 25% target share, half a touchdown per game, and close to 6.5 targets per game as well. Also, last time he played Tennessee in Week 11, he had his second best game of the year with 20.6 Draftkings points, close to 100 receiving yards, got into the end zone as well. And the Titans have been below average versus tight ends this season, so I would not be surprised if we do see a repeat performance for Mark Andrews here. And he just seems so much more exciting to play over guys like Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Eric Ebron, Jimmy Graham, Jonnu Smith, who I do think is a nice value tight end if he can't get all the way up to Mark Andrews. But Cole Kmet, I mean, he just by far just seems like the best tight end to use on this slate. So when there's that much of a gap between someone and the other guys at the position, I just tend to try to get all the way up to them so I can just have that guy that I absolutely want. All right, moving on to our fifth and final core play here. It's Corey Davis at $4,800, and I feel like it is just way too cheap here for the kind of role that he has in this offense. And I definitely want pieces from this game. And if I have a little Ravens stack going on with Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, it makes sense to want to run it back at least with someone. So Corey Davis, I think he's going to be that guy because A.J. Brown, he is super expensive. He's also been banged up in practice this week. And I feel like the Ravens defense is definitely going to try to key in on stopping Derrick Henry, which is definitely no easy task, but they're going to try to, and probably going to try to shut down A.J. Brown. So Corey Davis could see the softer coverage here. And he actually did have a pretty strong game versus the Ravens in their Week 11 matchup where he had over 100 receiving yards, 5 catches on 7 targets, on his way to a little bit over 19 DraftKings points, which is just fine at $4,800 if he could do something similar like that again. But on the season, about 6.5 targets per game, close to a 25% target share, also close to a 30% market share of a team's air yards, just a little bit above that. So at that price point, I feel like it's just a little bit too cheap. And he's a pretty talented wide receiver as well. And if A.J. Brown happens to be limited in any way in this game, there's just a massive boost here for Corey Davis. Now, the matchup isn't that great. The Ravens are 10th DVA versus the pass. They're allowing the 10th fewest points per game to the wide receiver position. But this is mainly just a price play. It's a 3-game slate, so we can't get too picky. Plus, this should be a pretty high-scoring game, so fantasy points are going to be scored. And if A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry have any struggles in this game, Corey Davis should be the main benefactor, and I love that price point. He fits nice and easy into your lineups as like a wide receiver 3 or flex option. But with that being said, guys, that's going to be it for the video, so I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Hit the notification bell as well. If you want to follow me over on social media, Pennell16 on Twitter, cpen16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. For the Discord chat, the spreadsheets, the notes, the projections, the cheat sheets, and all that good stuff for all the sports that I cover. But I think that's it. So hope you guys enjoyed the playoff games, and I'll see you guys in the next video.